Okay, before I relate my recent experience with a client, I think some background is in order. As you know, as professionals, we attend many seminars and conferences, and we hear new ideas, and some of them I would fall into the category of those ideas that you can implement immediately. You have a client in mind that you could put them into that particular idea. And some I would call, they fall into the category of banking. You're aware of an idea, but you don't have necessarily a client right now to implement it with, but you store it in your memory and on the hopes that one day you'll get to implement it. So approximately 2 years ago, I attended a UJA PAC seminar. And at that seminar, Jamie Gollenbeck did a presentation on donor-advised funds. And his tagline then was that private foundations are public and public foundations are private. And he demonstrated on the web that, in fact, if you took the time out, you could find a myriad of information concerning private foundations, and therefore there's a lack of anonymity with respect to them. Whereas with public foundations, it's much harder to get information concerning the particular donors and so on. So basically, I took away from that, and he also talked about various other benefits of donor-advised funds. So at that point in time, I didn't have a particular client in mind to recommend it to, but I stored it on the hopes that one day I would get to implement it. So recently I did have an opportunity. So the situation is I have a client who's a joint shareholder of a corporation with her brother. It holds a very, very sizable real estate portfolio. Historically, when this corporation, who I'm not the accountant for, has generated its cash from its profits from its real estate portfolio, it either invested in other real estate projects or within the same real estate projects, or it would invest in marketable securities and invest in the corporation. However, in 2012, they changed their view. They want to start divesting from each other, and so they decided to make a sizable cash dividend that would trigger a dividend refund and so on. So after a lot of deliberation, my client approached me in November 2012 and basically said to me that she was interested in making a sizable donation sufficiently large to wipe out the tax both on the dividend and her other sources of investment income. And she asked me for my advice. And so at that point in time, I advised her that she should look into a donor-advised fund. I made that recommendation basically for two reasons. The first was timing. I was pretty sure that given that we only had a month to go to make that donation for 2012, that if we would pursue a donor-advised fund, chances are it would get implemented as opposed to trying to set up a private foundation, which likely may not get implemented in time. The second reason I recommended the donor-advised fund is because I know my client that she's not really interested in being saddled with administrative responsibilities that would go hand in hand with establishing a private foundation. It seemed to me that a donor-advised fund would be a much easier way for her to meet her objectives and yet maintain her lifestyle needs and so on. So effectively, my client's a very sharp woman. I didn't need to really do a lot of selling. I basically put her in touch with Janice Benatar of UJA Foundation, and she did her own due diligence. But in the meantime, I did do a calculation of what I would estimate her tax liability to be for 2012. And I determined that effectively a $1 million donation would do the trick to wipe out more or less all of her tax for 2012. And in the end, I'm happy to report that my client did make that $1 million donation, of which half thereof, $500,000, was put into a donor-advised fund, which UJA Foundation. The other part of it is that we also enhanced the tax effectiveness of the donation because she did so through a gift of marketable securities with significant inherent capital gains in them. And so there's, I'm sure most of you know, there's no tax to pay on the capital gain when you do a donation to a public foundation. When I was approached by Janice now about speaking to you, I thought, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity. We were more concerned about logistics and so on and getting the donation done. So I thought, you know what, and it's a good opportunity to speak to my client and ask her, what exactly was it about UJA Foundation and its donor-advised funds that made you want to make that $500,000 financial commitment? And so basically she told me three things. On the top of her list, the most important thing to her actually was that she was particularly impressed with the roster of professionals that oversee the management of the investments here at UJA. So that's something to bear in mind. Secondly, she told me that she appreciated that there is a lot of flexibility offered with donor-advised funds, meaning that, on the one hand, yes, she wants to give to Jewish charities, but she doesn't want to be per se locked into only having to give to Jewish charities. And the donor-advised funds here at UJA Foundation is very flexible. She can make other donations to, environmental. She's kind of concerned about the environment, and she can make donations to environmental charities as well, and so on. So she mentioned that to me. And lastly, that she also appreciated the fact that there is a high degree of anonymity, both when you give the money and moreover when the future donations will be made from her donor-advised fund to those charities. So in summary, I must say that this whole experience was a very memorable one for me. I personally don't have the capability to cut a $1 million check to charity, but at least in this case, I was a participant in enabling one of my clients to do so. And it's actually energized me to the point that I've now had discussions with 2 other clients on this very same subject, one of whom is proceeding to do a donation through a donor-advised fund, and another one hopefully will get in touch with Janice to discuss his donative needs. So all I want to leave you with is just a word of encouragement that as professionals, I think it's incumbent on us to approach our clients, particularly those that are have a bent towards making donations and are charitable, and broaching the subject. There's no reason to think that a client is going to be able to figure it out on their own. And I also believe that it's not something that should only be done in conjunction with their will planning. I think it's more effective that somebody gives money during their lifetime as opposed to when they're passed away. So once again, please speak to your clients. Thank you.